Welcome to this explainer on the Book of Job. Today, we're diving into what Victor Hugo actually called the greatest masterpiece of the human mind. We're talking about the Book of Job. Now, this isn't just some dusty ancient poem. It is literally the oldest, most philosophically profound text of the ancient world. It's a text that dares to look straight into the darkest corners of human experience and ask the exact same questions we all wrestle with today.
At its core, this book wrestles with the ultimate mystery of human existence, right? Why do the innocent suffer? I mean, if you've lived long enough, you've seen it for yourself. Good people facing just insurmountable tragedies. Well, this ancient book tackles that exact paradox head-on. It absolutely refuses to offer us cheap cliches, and it completely rejects the simple equation that suffering is always just a punishment for bad behavior. Instead, it forces us to wrestle with the harsh reality of undeserved pain. To really understand this book, we've got to grasp the sheer emotional devastation of our main character. Job isn't some stoic robot. In chapter 3, he literally curses the very day he was born. He says, "Let the day perish wherein I was born." This is raw, agonizing grief. He isn't just crying over lost wealth here. He's experiencing this desolating loss of certainty about God's goodness. He brings us right down into the trenches of his raw suffering.
Part 1. Context of the oldest book. To fully appreciate this cosmic drama, we need to quickly look at when and where it's actually set.
So there's this fascinating internal evidence pointing to this being the oldest book in the Bible. For example, Job's wealth, it isn't measured in coins but in livestock. He lives 140 years after his tragedy, which is a massive lifespan matching the ancient patriarchs like Abraham. The text also uses the ancient name for God, Shaddai, 31 times. And perhaps most tellingly, there is absolutely zero mention of the Mosaic Law, the Exodus, or the nation of Israel. None of it. This places Job firmly in the ancient patriarchal period, somewhere around 2000 BC.
To frame all this intense emotion, the ancient author constructed the narrative using a brilliant chiastic structure. It basically opens and closes with prose, kind of like program notes for a play, but that massive center is an intense, beautifully crafted epic poem. Lord Tennyson even called it the greatest poem of ancient or modern times. This structure perfectly frames the intense, rhythmic debates that happen right in the middle of the story.
Section 2. The Cosmic Contest. The text now shifts our focus away from the dusty earth and way up into the unseen spiritual dimension. Here we encounter this fascinating concept of cosmic irony. As the audience, we get a backstage pass that Job never gets. We see Satan, the accuser, challenge God. God proudly points out Job's flawless integrity, and the accuser sneers back, "Does Job fear God for no reason?" He's basically claiming Job only loves God for the material blessings. The accuser wagers that if the blessings are removed, Job's faith will just evaporate. And the wild part? Job is completely unaware of this cosmic wager.
The breathtaking speed and scale of Job's catastrophic losses are almost impossible to comprehend. In a single day, cascading reports of doom arrive. Sabaean raiders, lightning, Chaldean nomads, and a massive windstorm completely wipe out his massive enterprise. He loses 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, his servants, and, unimaginably, all 10 of his children. Shortly after, a second test is permitted, and Job is struck with agonizing, loathsome sores from head to foot. It is a sudden, absolute fall from greatness.
Now, in the face of this absolute devastation, Job falls to the ground. But he doesn't curse. His astonishing initial reaction is actually worship. He says, "The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." This powerfully refutes the adversary's cynical claim that humanity only loves God for the perks. Job proves right here that genuine faith can exist totally independent of material gain. Section 3. Bad counsel and despair. Job's physical pain is horrific, but his mental anguish is about to be compounded by his closest peers.
When Job's three friends finally speak after 7 days of dead silence, it is an absolute disaster. We can break down their distinct arguments here. Eliphaz argues from observation and experience. Innocent people don't suffer, so Job, you must have sinned. Bildad argues from tradition, landing on the conclusion that Job is a hypocrite. And Zophar, he uses rigid orthodox dogma to declare Job is just a wicked man getting exactly what he deserves. They are distinct, yet equally flawed philosophical takes.
So all three friends operate on this deeply flawed, overly simple karma-like theology. If you're suffering, you must have sinned. They basically believe God is a vending machine. Put in good deeds, get prosperity. Put in sin, get suffering. The sources point out that while this is often a general truth in life, like what we see in the book of Proverbs, it is dangerously misapplied here.
They're taking a general rule and slapping it onto a complex, mysterious case they just do not have the cosmic clearance to understand.
Trapped between the agonizing silence of heaven and the brutal accusations of his friends, Job realizes his terrifying predicament. And he captures this desperate realization perfectly in chapter 9, saying, "There is no arbiter between us who might lay his hand on us both." He is crying out for an umpire, a mediator. He realizes he desperately needs someone who can lay a hand on both mortal man and a holy God, to bridge this massive, impossible gap.
After 3 exhausting rounds of debate, a younger observer named Elihu steps in. He introduces a completely fresh perspective. What if suffering isn't just punitive? What if God uses it to refine, to warn, and to teach us? Elihu really sets the stage for the book's climax here. And get this, as he speaks about the transcendent power of the Almighty, a literal, terrifying physical storm begins to gather on the horizon. Section 4. God answers the whirlwind. After 37 chapters of agonizing silence, the Creator finally speaks.
Out of that whirlwind, God unleashes a stunning barrage of questions. And spoiler alert, he doesn't give Job an itemized list of reasons for his suffering. Instead, God completely shifts the narrative authority away from human debate. He demands, "Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth?" It's a shocking pivot. It instantly shrinks the massive theological egos of these men debating out there in the ash heap.
God continues this rapid-fire divine interrogation, essentially giving Job a majestic science quiz. Have you commanded the morning? Can you bind the Pleiades? He asks about the balancings of the clouds, the springs of the sea, the constellations. Job is forced to realize that if he cannot even comprehend the basic mechanics of the physical universe, he certainly cannot judge the moral governance of it.
Then God points to Behemoth and Leviathan. These are uncontrollable, terrifying creatures, maybe representing massive real-world animals like the hippo or crocodile, or even extinct beasts. The profound theological point being made here is that humanity cannot draw out Leviathan with a fishhook. We cannot control the chaos of the world, but God can. God alone masters the wild, uncontrollable forces that absolutely terrify us.
And this brings Job to a truly beautiful breakthrough. Stunned by the sheer majesty of the Creator, Job repents in dust and ashes. But you know what? It isn't a defeat. It's a profound victory. He says, "I had heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you." He realizes that experiencing the overwhelming presence of God himself is the true answer. It's so much better and far more comforting than just getting a simple explanation.
Section 5. Deep Themes and Hope. Let's unpack the massive theological implications of how this ancient story resolves.
Look at this contrast in Job's fortunes before and after the trial. God ultimately restores him, giving him exactly double what he had before. 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen. But the sources are really careful to point out here. This is not an if you suffer, you get paid back formula. It's not some transactional payout. It is a brilliant showcase of sovereign grace. It's God's incredible generosity to a servant who proved that faith could endure the ultimate test.
And embedded right in the middle of Job's darkest suffering is this incredible, shining flame of hope. Back in chapter 19, he boldly declares, "For I know that my Redeemer lives, and at the last he will stand upon the earth." Even while his physical body is failing, Job confesses a living Redeemer and a future bodily resurrection. It's just a breathtaking moment of clarity right in the midst of total despair.
The sources also point out how Job perfectly prefigures Christ. Think about it. He's the ultimate innocent sufferer. He longed for a mediator, which Christian theology sees fulfilled in 1 Timothy 2:5. He interceded for his accusers. And he confessed a living Redeemer and a bodily resurrection. They note how this ancient longing, and the very concept of the righteous sufferer, finds its ultimate historical and theological fulfillment in Jesus Christ.
Which brings us to the end of our explainer, leaving us with the exact same provocative question Job had to answer. Will you trust the Creator who laid the foundations of the earth, even when you cannot understand his mysterious cosmic design? The book of Job wasn't written to hand us easy answers. It was written to show us that the God of the whirlwind is big enough to handle our hardest questions and trustworthy enough to hold our deepest pain.